I'm a 52-year-old mother from Ohio, and if you had asked me just a year ago, I would have told you my life was steady, ordinary, maybe even predictable. I've worked hard, raised my son, and kept my circle small, but loyal. I'm not the type who usually tells her story to strangers, but this one you need to hear. It began on a sunny afternoon, the kind of day that made me feel lighter. I was balancing a birthday cake on my lap, sitting in the passenger seat of my son's car. He didn't know I was there yet. I had planned this surprise with all the giddiness of a child. I thought, for once, I could give him back the joy he'd always given me. Then I heard it. Words I wasn't supposed to hear. At first, I thought I misheard. My chest tightened. My hands trembled, gripping the cake box so hard the lid bent. A pause. A silence heavier than anything I'd ever known. And then the truth settled in. Something was terribly wrong. That moment could have broken me. Instead, it pushed me toward a journey I never expected, a story not about weakness, but resilience and transformation. And it all starts here, with the birthday surprise. I remember balancing the cake carefully on my lap, the smell of chocolate frosting seeping through the thin cardboard lid. It wasn't anything fancy, just from the local bakery, but it carried all the love I could pack into a single box. Birthdays had always been a big deal in our house. When my husband was alive, we used to go all out, balloons taped to the walls, silly hats, and his booming laugh filling the room. After he passed, I promised myself I'd keep those traditions alive, at least for our son, sitting there in his car, waiting. I felt almost giddy, like I was the one turning a year older. I traced my finger along the edge of the box, remembering the years when my boy would bounce at the kitchen table, waiting for a slice of cake bigger than his plate. I could still hear his father teasing me about giving him too much sugar, though he always ended up sneaking a second piece himself. When the paperwork and bills piled up after the funeral, it was my son who stepped in. He sorted through the chaos with a steadiness I didn't have at the time. I trusted him completely, and I was so grateful to feel less alone. That bond, the kind forged through both grief and love, was what made this surprise feel so special. I smiled, steadying the cake as I heard footsteps outside. My heart beat faster, warmth swelling in my chest. The metal handle rattled, the car door creaked open, and in that suspended moment, I thought only of joy before everything changed. The car door swung open, and I froze, clutching the cake box tight against me. My breath caught in my throat as I slid lower into the seat, hidden in the shadows. I expected laughter, maybe a phone call, something ordinary. What I heard instead sliced straight through me. At first, it was small things, a hushed tone, the shuffle of papers, my son's voice, steady but cold. He spoke about signatures, documents already filed. My name, repeated like a burden. Then the words hit the house wasn't mine anymore. He had already signed it over. My chest tightened, air thinning as though the car itself was shrinking around me. I gripped the cardboard lid until it bent under my fingers. They went on my life insurance, adjusted, redirected. My husband's careful savings, the safety net he left for me, twisted into something I didn't recognize. Each word dropped heavy, each sentence a stone sinking in my stomach. And then the sharpest blow, their plan to move me out into a care facility. Not out of love, not out of worry, out of convenience, out of greed. My heart pounded so hard I thought they would hear it. My hands shook, frosting smudging against my skirt as the cake tilted. I wanted to scream, to burst from the back seat, to demand an explanation, to claw the lies from his mouth. But I couldn't. My body was locked in place, my voice swallowed whole. All I could do was listen as the truth unraveled me. Minutes felt like hours. My son's voice, my boy, the one I raised, the one I trusted above all, sounded like a stranger's. A part of me died right there, crumpled in silence. Yet in that death, something else stirred. A whisper, quiet but certain he underestimated me. I waited until they were gone. My legs were weak, my breath uneven, slowly, carefully. I slid out of the car, cake still trembling in my arms. The air outside hit cold against my skin, but it steadied me, step by step. I made my way home, each footfall a vow forming beneath me. They thought I was broken. They thought love had blinded me. But they were wrong. They mistook my love for blindness. And that was the moment I decided I would not let them win. The seeds of resolve had been planted. Now came the reckoning, and the painful look back at how I had let it get this far. I sat at the kitchen table with the cake untouched in front of me, its frosting beginning to sag under the room's warmth. The silence pressed heavy. My hands lay flat against the wood, still trembling from what I had overheard. I kept asking myself how I had let it come to this. Images drifted in uninvited. Family dinners where laughter bounced off the walls. My son leaning close to reassure me after his father passed. He had promised to handle the paperwork, to ease the burden. I let him. I signed where he told me. Grateful someone was taking care of the things I didn't understand. I never questioned. Not once. That trust had felt like love, but now it burned like shame. I remembered the way he had nudged me aside when mail came, how he always insisted he would take care of it. I thought it was kindness. Now I saw it differently. Those small red flags ignored, dismissed, rose up like ghosts I could no longer push away. I wanted to believe I had done right by him, that my love had made him strong. Instead, I had handed him the keys to everything without even reading the locks. My heart ached with guilt, heavier than the betrayal itself. But sitting there, staring at the cake, meant to celebrate. I realized collapse was not an option. Tears blurred my vision, but beneath them something hardened. I would not confront him, not yet. I would watch. I would listen. Quietly, carefully. I would piece together the truth. That night at the kitchen table, regret became resolve. My son thought he had outmaneuvered me. He had no idea that his mother had just begun to dig. The search for answers had already started. The morning after the shock, I sat at the kitchen table again. Only this time, I wasn't frozen. I had a plan. I couldn't undo what I had overheard, but I could search for the truth hidden in plain sight. My son believed I wouldn't look too closely. He had underestimated me. I started small. I walked down to the bakery where I bought his birthday cake, forcing myself into the rhythm of ordinary errands. As the clerk wrapped a loaf of bread, I listened to her chatter about recent orders. My son's name slipped into her story, large catering, paid in cash. I smiled politely, but inside, a question formed. Where had that money come from? I tucked it away like a breadcrumb in a trail I was just beginning to follow. Next, I visited the bank. My heart hammered as I slid my card into the ATM, scrolling through withdrawals I didn't recognize. Amounts too large, too frequent. My breath caught, and I stepped aside quickly, pretending I had forgotten something. I couldn't let anyone see the way my knees shook. Back in the car, I stared at the receipts. They weren't mistakes. They were deliberate. at home. I pulled out the mail I still had tucked in drawers. Letters from insurance, envelopes I had never opened because I trusted him to explain. I slit one open with trembling fingers. Policy changes. Beneficiary listed differently. My chest tightened. It was one thing to suspect, another to see it in black and white. Each clue stacked against him, and against me my silence, my blind trust. Fear rose with every discovery, but alongside it came a steadier current determination. If I stopped now, I'd never forgive myself. By the time the sun set, I knew this was bigger than casual lies. It was systematic, calculated, the kind of betrayal that left a paper trail. And so, I turned toward the one place I had avoided the longest, the finances. If I wanted answers, that's where I'd have to dig next. The bank lobby smelled faintly of coffee and floor polish. I clutched my purse tighter as I walked to the counter, my heart beating faster than I wanted to admit. On the surface, I was calm, just another woman checking her accounts. Inside, though, I felt like I was walking into a storm I couldn't avoid. I asked to review my account records. The clerk smiled politely, tapping at her keyboard, before handing me a folder of documents. My fingers shook as I opened it. The first page looked ordinary until I saw his name listed beside mine as primary. My son. My breath caught in my throat. I flipped to the next set of papers. Life insurance? Beneficiary changed? Not me. Not even split among family? Solely him. My hands went cold. Each page I turned cut deeper. Property records. Pending documents that showed intent to sell the house, my house. The place where I raised him. Where my husband and I built a life together. Then I saw it. My own signature. Slanted, shaky, but not mine. Forged, or maybe taken from some form I'd signed in haste, trusting him to explain later. I stared at that crooked line as if it were a knife in my chest. I wanted to scream. Instead, silence pressed heavy against me. A silence filled with disbelief, heartbreak, and a new, rising fire. He had written me out of my own life, quietly and methodically. Every detail, every safeguard I thought I had, it was gone. I sat there longer than I should have. The papers spread before me like evidence in a trial I never asked for. My mind raced back to the day my husband died, to the moment I let my son take control because I couldn't bear the weight of decisions. I told myself it was trust. Maybe it was weakness. But as the minutes ticked on, something shifted. The grief was still sharp, but beneath it, a steady resolve began to grow. These papers weren't just betrayal. They were proof. Undeniable. I gathered the folder, thanked the clerk with a voice steadier than I felt, and walked out into the sunlight. For the first time in days, I didn't feel blind. I felt awake. He had tried to erase me, but I would not let myself disappear. And as I held that vow close, I knew the next step was clear. I couldn't face this battle alone. It was time to reach out for support. The house was too quiet that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the lights dimmed, the papers from the bank still in my bag, as if hiding them would soften the truth. My chest felt hollow, my breath heavy. The son I had loved, the boy I had once rocked to sleep, had carved me out of my own life. The weight of that betrayal pressed down so hard I could barely move. I cried in silence. Not the kind of crying that comes and goes quickly, but the slow, aching tears that seemed to drain every ounce of strength. I stared at the walls, at the family photos still hanging there, and wondered how much of it had been real. How could I have been so blind? How could love have turned into this? The hours blurred together until the loneliness itself became unbearable. I picked up the phone. My hands shook as I scrolled through numbers I hadn't dialed in years. Finally, I pressed an old friend, someone who had known me before the widowhood, before the weakness. Her voice was steady, grounding. I didn't tell her everything, not yet, but I let enough slip to feel the edge of relief. Just hearing another person breathe on the other end reminded me that I wasn't completely alone. By the time I hung up, the house felt less suffocating. The grief was still there, sharp and heavy, but a small thread of hope had wound its way through the despair. I realized then that I could lean on others, that I didn't have to carry this weight in silence. I wiped my face, straightened in my chair, and whispered to myself, I am not done. Tomorrow, I would start to plan. The night after I reached out for help, something inside me shifted. My grief was still raw, but the words of encouragement I had received stayed with me. I realized that if I kept drowning in sorrow, I would hand my son exactly what he wanted: my silence, my surrender. I could not give him that. I began to think like a survivor, not a victim. Step 1 was evidence. Feelings meant little in a fight like this. I needed facts, papers, and proof that no one could deny. I went over my documents carefully, setting aside anything that looked altered. I kept notes, even on the smallest details, because I knew they would matter later. Step 2 was counsel. I resolved to find legal advice quietly, someone who could guide me through the maze of signatures and rights I had too easily handed over. I didn't need to move fast. I needed to move smart. Step 3 was myself. I had to steady my own heart. Anger could cloud judgment. Patience would give me strength. So I sat in my kitchen, writing lists, rehearsing possibilities, reminding myself that this wasn't just about property or money. This was about dignity. And then it struck me: words slip away, but recordings remain. If I wanted the truth exposed, I would need his own voice to betray him. That thought stayed with me, sharp and electric, as I laid my pen down. I was ready to wait, to listen, and to capture the moment that would change everything. I had never imagined I would one day scheme against my own child. The thought itself felt wrong, like a betrayal of motherhood. But then I reminded myself he had already betrayed me. Recording him was not about revenge. It was survival. I spent nights thinking about how to do it. I practiced with the small recorder until I could turn it on and slip it into my purse without looking. My hands shook the first time I rehearsed it. What kind of mother hides devices to catch her son lying? Yet what kind of son steals his mother's life out from under her? The day came sooner than I expected. He called, asking to stop by and check on things. My stomach twisted, but I saw the opening. Before he arrived, I set the recorder on a shelf, half hidden behind a stack of cookbooks. I adjusted the angle twice, making sure it wouldn't catch the light. Then I sat at the kitchen table, heart pounding, pretending to sip tea. The front door opened. His footsteps echoed too loud in the quiet house. I forced myself to stay calm, nodding as he spoke casually, as if nothing were wrong. I kept my eyes down, letting him believe I was still weak, still blind. And then it happened. He began talking on his phone, pacing the kitchen, unaware of the little red light blinking faintly behind the cookbooks. His words were sharp, careless, dripping with confidence. He bragged about the paperwork being airtight. He mentioned the insurance, the accounts, even the plan to move me into a facility before winter. Each word cut deeper than the last. My palms were damp, my breath shallow. I prayed the device was catching it all. At one point, he walked so close, I thought he might hear the pounding of my heart. But he didn't. He kept talking, so sure of himself, so certain I was powerless. Minutes dragged like hours until he finally left, slamming the door behind him. I didn't move right away. I sat frozen, staring at the floor, listening to the ringing in my ears. Then I rose, my legs unsteady, and retrieved the recorder. The weight of it in my hand felt unreal. Proof. His own voice, his own words. I pressed play, and the sound confirmed what I already knew, but needed the world to hear. Tears blurred my vision, but beneath them burned something stronger resolve. The guilt of recording him was still there, but it was drowned out by the relief of knowing I was no longer defenseless. For the first time since this nightmare began, I had power in my hands. He thought I was broken, but now I was armed with the truth, and soon he would face it. The house was silent when he arrived, that heavy kind of silence that hums in the walls. I was sitting at the dining table, the recorder tucked safely beside me. My palms were flat against the wood, steadying myself for what I knew had to happen. He walked in like he always did, casual, confident, his keys jangling as if this home already belonged to him. He didn't notice the way my eyes followed him. For years I had looked at him with trust. That day, I looked at him with truth. I let him talk first, all smooth words and false concern. I didn't interrupt. I just waited, watching his mouth form the lies I could no longer pretend to believe. Then I placed the recorder on the table and pressed play. His voice filled the room, unmistakable. Every boast, every cruel plan, every word about selling my house and sending me away. His face drained. For the first time, he was the one caught off guard. He tried to recover. He raised his voice, demanded explanations, twisted his story. He said I misunderstood, that I was confused, that grief had clouded my judgment. Each excuse was another knife, but I didn't flinch. My voice was steady when I told him I had heard enough, that I was no longer blind. His anger cracked through the air. He slammed his hand on the table, tried to tower over me, but I didn't shrink back. I told him the documents, the accounts, the forged signatures, none of it could be hidden now. The recorder was proof. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The space between us charged and unrecognizable. He was not the boy I had raised, and I was no longer the mother who would cover for him. The balance shifted then. He saw it in my eyes, the line he could not cross back over. His power was gone, and he knew it. My heart ached, but my spine was straight. I told him this house was mine, my life was mine, and no amount of schemes could take that away. The storm had broken. The walls of my home had heard the truth, and so had he. There was no undoing it. And as he left, fury in his steps, I knew the battle was only beginning. The invasion was coming, and so was my reckoning. The shouting started the moment he realized I wasn't backing down. His words cut sharp, each one louder than the last, filling the walls of the house I had once called safe. He slammed the door so hard the pictures rattled, the sound echoing like a warning. My hands shook, but I stayed seated, clutching the recorder as if it were the only anchor keeping me steady. He stormed through the rooms, his voice chasing me from one corner to the next. Every step he took seemed heavier, closer, as if he wanted to press me back into silence. When he finally loomed over me, his shadow swallowed mine. His breath was hot, his anger spilling into my space. My chest tightened, my heart racing so fast I could barely breathe. For a moment, I thought he might actually cross a line I couldn't come back from. I whispered inside myself to hold on, to not let him see the fear. But my legs trembled under the table, my fingers cold against the wood. Short, shallow breaths. The room spun. I felt my body teeter on the edge of collapse. Then came the silence, that sharp, cutting silence after the storm of shouting. He turned away, pacing like a caged animal, muttering under his breath. I sat frozen, staring at the proof in my hand, the tiny recorder, now heavy as stone. It was my lifeline, my shield. Even if my voice shook, even if I felt broken, I still had this. He couldn't erase it. Tears burned my eyes, but I swallowed them down. I knew then I couldn't endure another night like this, trapped between fear and betrayal under my own roof. I couldn't keep this battle in the shadows anymore. I would need help. Legal help. Outside eyes. Forces stronger than his fury. As he slammed the door one last time, and the house fell quiet again, I pressed the recorder to my chest and made myself a promise. This fight was no longer just mine in secret. It was time to bring the truth into the light. After the storm in my house, the silence that followed was almost worse. I sat at the kitchen table, drained, staring at the recorder lying in front of me. My hands were steady now, though my body still felt hollow. The fear had not left me, but something stronger had taken its place, an understanding that I could not keep fighting alone. Gathering the evidence was both simple and brutal. I spread the papers across the table: bank statements, life insurance documents, property deeds. Each page felt like another piece of myself laid bare. The signatures that weren't mine. The dates that didn't match. The cold precision of betrayal written in ink. I slipped the recorder beside them, the tiny device carrying the heaviest truth of all. I placed everything into a folder, the weight of it both crushing and oddly comforting. Walking into the lawyer's office felt like stepping into a new life. My knees were weak, but I carried that folder like armor. I told myself this wasn't just about revenge, it was about survival. Still, as I sat across from the polished desk, I felt the sting of shame. How had I let it go this far? How had love made me blind? As I explained, memories surfaced like ghosts. My husband's quiet warnings I had brushed aside. Old family debts he had shielded me from. Small manipulations my son had pulled even as a teenager. Excused as immaturity. It all connected, now threads weaving into a history of silence and avoidance. This betrayal wasn't born overnight. It had roots, deep and tangled, stretching back years. The lawyer's questions were steady, professional, but I felt each one slice through the fog I had been living in. I answered with a trembling honesty, placing my shame on the table along with my proof. For the first time, I wasn't hiding anymore. When I left that office, the folder no longer felt like a burden. It was my shield, my weapon, my voice. The path ahead would be brutal, public, and painful. But I had crossed the line from silence to action. I stepped out into the cool air, lifted my chin, and promised myself this: I would face the courtroom not as a victim, but as a woman reclaiming her life. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not the air, but the silence that followed the judge's final words. My hands, resting on the polished wood of the bench, trembled only slightly. It was done. The truth was no longer mine alone to carry. It had been spoken, written, and recorded into the record. Justice, after months of fear and humiliation, had been served. When they played the recording, I felt my chest tighten, as if I were hearing it for the first time again. His voice, my son's voice, laying out every deception with a calmness that once fooled me but could not fool the court. The papers, the signatures, the financial trail, they all aligned with the betrayal I had lived in silence. Watching the judge and jury nod, seeing the truth settle into the room like a weight no one could deny, I felt both vindicated and shattered. There was no joy in that moment. How could there be? I had not come here to win, but to survive. And yet, as the ruling fell in my favor, a quiet strength rose in me. I had stood against the storm. I had refused to be erased. Walking out of that courthouse, the sunlight hit me differently. It wasn't brighter, but it felt honest, unforgiving, and clear. I thought of my husband, of the home we built, of the traditions that once tied us together. All of it scarred now, but not destroyed. I carried the loss, but I also carried dignity. No one could take that from me again. This journey was never about vengeance. It was about reclaiming myself when the person I trusted most tried to strip me of everything. Justice doesn't restore what's lost, but it does give you ground to stand on again. And so I stand here now, sharing this with you, not as a victim, but as someone who learned too late. Maybe, but not too late to fight back. If my story touches something in you, don't stay silent. Speak, share, protect yourself and those you love. And if you believe in resilience and truth, I ask you to like, share, and comment. Let's remind each other that even in betrayal, dignity can be reclaimed. When I look back on everything, the cake in my lap, the laughter I once trusted, the silence of my kitchen, the trembling walk into a courtroom, I see not just betrayal, but also survival. I see the parts of myself I thought had been broken, and how they pieced themselves back together, sharper and stronger than before. What I learned is this: love is powerful, but love without boundaries can blind you. Trust is a gift, not a guarantee. And resilience, it doesn't come dressed in triumph. It comes in the quiet moments when you choose not to give up, even when it feels easier to collapse. I spent years believing that family was unshakable, that blood alone was enough to protect me. But family is more than biology. It's respect, loyalty, and care. When those things are absent, even a stranger can treat you with more kindness than your own child. That truth hurt more than I can put into words, but it also freed me. It showed me that dignity doesn't come from others, it comes from standing up for yourself, even when your knees are trembling. Justice was never about revenge for me. It was about reclaiming my life, my voice, and my worth. Betrayal took pieces of my heart, but it didn't take all of me. What remained was enough to fight with, enough to heal with, and enough to keep moving forward. So if you're listening to me now, I hope you take this with you. Don't wait until it's too late to protect yourself. Don't ignore the small signs, and don't let guilt silence you. Most of all, don't mistake love for weakness. You can love deeply and still stand firmly. This was my story, but maybe in some way, it's yours too. If it resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences, comment with your reflections, or simply let someone you love know that you're there for them. Because at the end of the day, we survive best when we remind each other we're not alone. Thank you for staying with me through this story. It wasn't easy to tell, but knowing someone is listening makes the journey feel a little lighter. If you found something meaningful here, I'd love for you to subscribe so you don't miss the stories I'll share next. Each one carries its own lessons about resilience, love, and what it means to keep moving forward. If you know someone who might need to hear this, please share it with them. Sometimes a story arrives in someone's life at just the right moment, and you never know who might find comfort in it, and I'd truly love to hear from you. Leave a comment with your thoughts, or share your own experiences. We learn the most when we listen to one another. At the end of the day, we're not alone, we're a community, connected by the stories we carry.